thank you for joining us today. We will now talk about a topic that is both very challenging and absolutely essential for most companies. We will talk about layoffs, about restructurings, and the costs of it, the costs of cuttings. We will have 3 people here on stage with us today. We are very happy that George joins us from Thinksurance.
Thanks for having me.
George will give you his first-hand account of how Thinksurance reacted to the softening of the venture capital market, how they restructured and how they regained their financial stability. Andrea and me are from Project A. We are from the people team. We will give you an overview about the costs, about the direct and indirect costs of cutting, about how to mitigate those costs, and what kind of current trends we are currently seeing in the VC world and outside the VC world regarding layoffs. Okay, we got to check if our technical setup works. Okay. Let's just continue for the moment. Our agenda is we will start with some current trends that we're seeing at the moment. Then we'll dive into the cost side, how to mitigate those costs, and then George will give you his experience from Thinksurance.
Luckily, we don't need slide decks for my experience.
That's a good thing. Okay, so let's start. Right now, we want to start with a couple of trends that are currently shaping the situation that we're in and that are giving relevance to the topic. First of all, we are having still bad economic situations. We are just getting out of the pandemic. Alone in the startup industry, around 70% of companies had to do layoffs. In the US, we had 22 million jobs lost. And at the same time, we're getting new tech, we're getting AI, and we're getting automation, giving dynamic to the entire industry. If McKinsey is right, we'll lose about 800 million jobs worldwide due to automation in the next 5 years. So the challenges that this keeps for not only for the business world and for leadership, but also for our society are actually so big, they are really difficult to grasp. Plus, on the other hand, we are seeing companies in Germany adopting a trend from the US of performance management terminations, meaning companies lay off low performers in a structured and regular way. There are different approaches to that, all with the same goal. There's, for instance, the Amazon approach of measuring your people's performance, placing low performers on a performance improvement plan with quantified goals. Not meeting those goals results in a termination. Then there is the Uber way of rating your people's performance along a bell curve. That means you have a pretty large number of mid-performers and a rather low number of high and low performers, and just cutting off the low performers in your company at a regular basis. Netflix has popularized the keeper test. That means Netflix asks their managers, do you want to fight? Would you want to fight for this employee? And if the manager says no, they are encouraged to lay them off. That is a very much a US approach that fits into their legal system and into their market. Less in Germany, but we are seeing companies in Germany adopting that approach, especially in the startup industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, these market developments, when we are especially looking also in the ecosystem startup, has put the companies under an anonymous pressure, right? Like financial pressure. So first of all, the funding reduced a lot, like according to Crunchbase, more than 35% of the volume last year. And also the valuation of the companies, especially the later stages, dropped a lot from the last years. Along with this, the shareholder expectations changed. Investors, for example, or venture capitalists really urge their companies to focus on profitability and efficiency, and also why we are sitting here today. And all this market realignment actually comes to the conclusion that at the moment it's a lot about cost cutting, it's a lot about reallocation resources, and at the end, it's also about building more leaner organizations. When we are looking inside our Project A work, for example, Phoenix is the best example, right? We are helping our clients and portfolio companies to become profitable. And also from the HR side, we help many companies in downsizing their staff at the end. And just looking at pure numbers, for example, when we are looking at the labor market or the talent market in our regard, we receive usually about 40,000 applications per year. And over the last 2 years, 25% of direct application increase. So even there is a shift towards more an employer market. It's still a talent market in this regard, but it's a bit of a more shift here. Let's continue with the costs generally, like the direct costs and the indirect costs here. And first of all, I would like to hand over again to Fabian.
Okay, sorry for running back and forth here. The technical setup is not really our thing today. Okay, so on a cost side, we first of, we have direct costs that are clearly visible and measurable, and then we have less visible costs. We want to start with the direct and very visible costs, and first of all, we have compensation and legal fees towards people. And that stuff depends on a couple of factors. First of all, we have the market that we are operating in. For instance, the US or the UK has a relatively low protection against dismissals. That means severance payments are rather low in these areas. Yeah, Germany is kind of mid-level. France has a very high protection against dismissals, and Italy is, for instance, completely bonkers regarding any kind of regulations. Plus, we have notice periods of our people. Plus, we have legal costs for those lawyers. In Germany, I just assume that most of you are coming from Germany and are operating in Germany. The usual costs are governed by our Kündigungsschutzgesetz, by the Protection Against Dismissals Act, and that tells us that usual severance payment depends on the tenure of the employee and their monthly salary. There's like a usual formula that is 0.5 multiplied with the salary multiplied with the tenure. And that applies for cases where we have very, very strong reasons to terminate a contract. When we are, however, terminating for reasons that are not perfectly applicable to the legal situation in Germany, for instance, when we're doing performance-based terminations, and a lot of companies are actually doing that, then we are paying higher severance, and the usual factor rises to 1 or 1.5 multiplied with the monthly salary multiplied with the years of tenure, assuming that we don't have a workers' council or a union. Basically, that kind of would restrict our flexibility by a lot. Yeah, but those are the absolute hard costs, must have no way around it costs.
Yeah, technically, when we talk about cost cutting, it's not really part of it, but to be honest, we realized a lot, and especially when we talk about performance-based layoffs, that often with a fire also comes or follows a hire. And that means, by calculating the cost, it's extremely crucial always to put into consideration the recruiting part. It's quite a known number, like the tech industry usually says that in Germany, 7,000 to 12,000 costs a hire. That means usually it's a hard cost, like the external providers, technology, and also the staff who's working on that, the recruiters. Have in mind when you calculate these costs, there are these hidden costs or soft costs. Like for example, when an employee ramps up, like the ramp-up phase, usually calculates 3 to 6 months until the employee is really on 100% productivity, and this is what we pay for. So these are also costs what occur and should be put into consideration. Same as training and onboarding, right? Training sessions cost, people who are involved in the onboarding. And these are all things what should put into consideration, and especially with the strategy, do we plan maybe to hire in 2-3 months later?
Right, and next to these like clearly visible costs, we also have then the less visible costs, the more indirect costs. And those are a multitude of reasons, but primarily they are about your culture, your brand, and how people in your organization react on these layoffs, these 3 factors. Let's assume the Uber case that was in the news a while ago. Yeah, Julian, if you can just switch a few times. And now, next slide. Yeah, No, is there? Thank you. Okay. So when we remember the Uber case, I'm not sure how many of you followed that in the news. What Uber did is they just cut off low-performing employees, and they got them all in a Zoom call, like a few hundred of them, and they told them, okay, guys, today is your last working day. And people just went home. Now, obviously, that is a culture-defining moment, and that is an image-defining moment. And it's rough, and it's obviously kind of brutal, and I think it would be toxic for most companies, but we also have to keep in mind that it doesn't have to be that kind of toxic. Amazon, for instance, is a company that also has a very, very rough culture, but an incredibly successful culture. Yeah, they are still able to attract awesome people and retain them and engage them. Yeah, because they are doing everything they are doing on an incredibly high level, so that is possible. I think we just have to ask ourselves, in what kind of culture are we operating, and what do our people expect from us? Yeah. And then on the other hand, there are the survivor reactions. The question, how are the people who are remaining in the company after layoffs dealing with the situation? And I am sure that these are the most significant costs. Because when we're doing layoffs, it threatens what is for most people in our companies the existential basis. And their reaction is uncertainty, insecurity, sometimes maybe fear. Maybe they will lose trust in us, in our management, maybe in our strategy. Maybe they will react with a lack of loyalty going forward. Overall, they will react with what is known as survivor sickness. If you can go to the next slide, Julian. This is a summary of the research that we have from the last 30 years. People who remain in the company after layoffs react with a loss of commitment, with a decline of motivation and engagement, with reduced job satisfaction, increased turnover and absenteeism. And the research regarding performance is actually kind of interesting, because regarding the in-role performance, that means the performance regarding people's job descriptions, what they actually have to do on a regular basis, there is ambiguity about the impact, but their extra-role performance, that means the performance that is not in their job descriptions, like onboarding new employees, mentoring more junior employees, that decreases very drastically. Yeah. So overall, at the bottom line, we can say that 30-something% of companies can increase their productivity after layoffs, but 60-something% of companies cannot. Julian, can you switch? This is a quote from a researcher. It says, layoff survivor sickness is probably the primary reason that downsizing has seldom resulted in increased productivity. And that summarizes the situations really, really well. On the other hand, we have to keep in mind that this can be managed. Layoff survivor sickness depends on how we are processing these kind of layoffs. Especially it depends on the perception that people have from how we are treating the laid-off employees, how decent and how fair are we acting, and how necessary are the layoffs. There is a lot of naivety in the market. Julian, can you switch to the next slide? Julian? Yeah, thanks. This is a quote from Reed Hastings. Reed Hastings is the CEO of Netflix. He wrote a book about culture. It's called No Rules Rules, and that is a quote from this book about the first layoffs at Netflix when he downsized from 120 to 80 people. It says, the atmosphere improved dramatically. The office was suddenly buzzing with passion, energy, and ideas. We were doing far more work. Spirits were sky high. Our employees were happier. That book spread like wildfire among the CEOs in our network. Obviously that is bonkers. That contradicts all the research from the last 30 years. The CEOs who actually copied the Netflix approach, and we had a couple of them, had horrible layoffs. They were sued en masse by their employees. My point is, what I want to say
Welcome to Europe.
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome to Europe. But also what I want to say is there are costs connected to layoffs, and layoffs usually hurt the business, and we can very much manage these kind of costs. And Andrea will tell you now how to manage them.
Exactly. I mean, let's agree downsizing is necessary from time to time for sure, but it's important when we click on the next slide, how, like we kind of actually, based of course on C, but also a lot on what we observed the last 2 years within working with clients and our portfolio companies, have like pointed out 2 major things. First of all, the treatment of the levers can go completely wrong, believe me. So whenever you plan something like that, it's important to have a clear and transparent process in place, like a decent one where you also have like a clear communication plan. And by this, Fabian talked about it already, a severance package, especially when it comes to a bit of a questionable termination reason, is necessary. It can be really costly if you don't put it into consideration. The communication here comes along with this. Means it's important to have also clear communication formats, town halls, one-on-ones, also having a contact person for the people who guide the people who leave or have to leave the company through the layoff process. On top of that, also the remaining employees are extremely crucial for us, right? These are the A players, these are the people we want to actually push our lean organization forward. So important is here that the leadership is heavily involved, that you really have a strong communication in terms of your narrative, and also that the leaders really explicitified the vision and also their rationals behind the layoffs, because people are interested about it, people want to know about it. And according to this, it makes sense to also gather feedback afterwards from the remaining people to gauge concerns and to really react on this. Another one, what we found very interesting and what happens also lately, because, I mean, we described the market before, right? There's a lot of pressure in the market and a lot of about cost cutting, and it kind of also sometimes happens that people or founders and leaders are so focused on that they are doing cost cutting and losing the long-term perspective, the strategic focus. And in this regard, it really can harm the operational business, right? We talked a lot about damage the reputation and also losing maybe the A players in our company, but really that can harm the overall business. So all these 3 factors are, to be honest, extremely crucial. And George, Fabian, and I, we also discussed 3 days ago that this is so important, and why we talk here about this, because the European market is extremely precise on that. We have very local labor markets, even not just the countries because of the language, also regions, like we have the Berlin hub, London hub, Paris hub. So damaging a reputation here can really have an effect on a long-term perspective. We would like to share 2 examples from our clients or portfolio we worked with. One is, it's a bit of a similar example to the Uber case, where there happened a mass layoff and people opened their laptops in the morning and received a 2-sentence line of their termination note, and without any other note, without any severance package, and also they of the accessibility, but also where we usually like to handle it like this. So what happened at the end? It became very costly for the company. Mass lawsuit, also the reputation was damaged, because in this particular case, we had even the situation that it was known that the company is financially stable, and also they announced a follow-up round, a financial round, for a few months later. So it's always often also a case of timing, what comes into this too when you think about planning layoffs, especially when you plan mass layoffs. Another one, what's like a bit of an easier example, but it's still something what is a learning point. We had one founder, to be honest, who stood up in front of their employees and said, and I think he wasn't prepared for that, he said, well, it's not my responsibility, it's the responsibility of an external provider. And then he left on holiday and wasn't reachable. And this, of course, harmed a lot the reputation. I mean, you can imagine by hearing this, it sounds outraged, but I, to be honest, think he was just simply not prepared for it, right? He was a founder and maybe not used to the situation. And this is how these things happen, right? It's not a clear plan to act like this. It's like kind of not planning it through. We have, if we go to one more, we have 3 known examples. I would actually skip this because Fabian mentioned it already very nicely, but Uber is always a very good case study if you want to walk yourself through layoffs. And Tesla, it's a bit of a different example, but still I'd like to share that because Tesla did more than 100 layoffs in spring. And that was a time when also the Tesla stocks went down. So it was part of cost cutting, and 2.5 months later, they published 800 jobs. Also put a few particular jobs in strategic areas like robotics and AI, where they could explain how or why they do it. But also a lot of jobs they published what actually was downsized before. And based on this timing again, Elon Musk really had to answer a lot of questions why he did the cost cutting, and if he even really didn't thought it through on the long term or on the strategic perspective. I mean, we don't know what Elon Musk was thinking. I don't want to open up this discussion, but still, it creates more visibility in a negative way and can have a negative impact, and that should be always put into consideration. And the last one before I'm happy to hand over to George, George will actually share a bit of a more better example here. Example what I very much like. I mean, this is an agency, and the CEO laid off a few people, and after that he made a post of himself crying, and like a long post about how this is the lowest point of his work career. That went viral, and of course it went viral because it was criticized a lot about, it's not about you as a leader, it's about the people you lay off, so please concentrate on them. So it's really important as all these treating the levers, communication, also having this strategic focus in mind for your company, of course, but also how you actually go outside and share this information. Yes, and now I'm happy to, as I said, hand over to George. Super excited about his case.
Cool, thanks for having me. This is my first conference for a while, actually. We've been heads down on the business for a year or two, so it's nice to get back into the public sphere. So I'm the CFO of Thinksurance. I've been with the company almost 2 years now. Actually came from the investor side. So I spent 8 or 9 years on the venture capital side at Columbia Lake. He's one of our sponsors today. Thanks for having me, Columbia Lake. And so, I've been in the middle of a shift from kind of investor side, looking at different software companies across Europe, to now running one company with a team of around 90 today. So Thinksurance, we're a software company based in Frankfurt. We sell software to commercial insurance brokers and insurance carriers only in Germany. Actually, the company it's been around for a while. It was a pivot. Originally, it was set up to compete with Check24 to do business insurance online. Turns out in Germany, everyone loves insurance brokers. No one wants to buy commercial insurance online. So we pivoted to providing tools and a platform to brokers to enable them to consult their customers. And so it was an interesting time when I joined the company. We'd raised a fair amount of capital. I think the most recent financing round of equity and debt was around 20 million euros. And I think it was pretty clear when the venture market started to turn. We look at software multiples in the US, how our business would trade, how it would be valued. It's also pretty clear that venture capital in Europe was tightening up. We had a pretty good view that fundraising would be more challenging for VCs, and there would be a trickle-down effect for us. And so I think the good thing is our team, especially our CEO, started to react around the future is going to be very different from the past. And so the next thing that we were thinking through as a business was how can we very quickly, but without disruption, reduce our reliance on funding. And this has been an evolving topic for us. So for us, I think one learning would be internationalization. I think we went into other countries way too early. And if you look at the commercial insurance market in Germany, it's 30 billion of gross written premium per year. And we were managing anywhere from 20 to 30 million per year at that point. So our penetration in our core market was very, very low. At the same time, we had most of the customers, and we were activating a lot of the brokers and insurers to transact on our platform. So I think super simply, France didn't make sense for us to think about how we spend €1 into France, where we were very early in sales cycles with brokers and insurers. Our brand was very nascent. I think there was a hypothesis in the company that the insurers in Germany knew the insurers in France. So if you had a contract with Allianz in Germany, that would mean we could cross-sell into France. That very much turned out to be wrong. French insurers are very different, separate entities, separate teams to German insurers. So I think taking a step back, we wanted to really put all of our euros into our core market. So when I came in, I went to wind down our French entity. I think one interesting learning was I think we had a lot of potential investors telling us that internationalization was really, really important for our story, to prove more markets, to increase our market size. I think that's fair, but you need to think about sequencing. And so I think our realization was we kind of retreat back to Germany. We will just do Germany. We want to be very relevant to our customers in Germany. We want to put all of our euros and our bets into Germany. And so, one learning was, do what you think is best, have some first principles around where you want to spend your euros. I think looking at investors that were looking at the company and telling us to internationalize, we shouldn't trust too much their understanding on our business. We're in our business every day. They're looking at hundreds of different companies, maybe on the board of 10 different companies. So I think their insights will be important, but I think our gut feel is the most important thing as the management team. And so winding down France was very challenging. It's definitely my welcome to Europe moment, looking at the employment laws there, how to treat people correctly, the hoops you need to walk through legally. I think on your list, it was one of the hardest to be an employer and to do that job easily. But we got that done last year. We kind of retreated back to Germany, and we now have our kind of first principles of opportunity cost of capital on 1 euro here, 1 euro there, and all of our euros are now into Germany where customers know us, we have a good brand, and we can just continue to grow in our core market. I think the next piece that we thought about when the venture market started to change was when we're building our cost base from kind of the ground up in our budgeting, how do we divide short-term payoffs into long-term payoffs? Now, this is also, I think, a kind of cost of capital thing. When capital becomes more expensive, there should be a natural shift in my mind to more short-term payoffs. And I think for us, the danger was always, we could always go and build that new feature. We could always think about what customers might want in 3 to 5 years. We could always think about building a new product, all sorts of different things, going to a different part of our market in Germany. And that's actually quite a big distraction, especially with a trimmed down team in Germany. We can only really have 1 or 2 priorities per year. So we also went to really think about what are our 1, 2 things this year, what might be our 1, 2 things next year, but that's always a moving target. And we killed a bunch of kind of nice to have, this feature might be sold to an insurance carrier, but we don't really know. And we can't be in the business of taking lots of these long-term bets when actually, it is going to be hard to raise capital, and we need to really have some concentrated bets where we have really good data on the product and how it's working for our customers. I think it's also, working at Columbia Lake, one of the principles we had there was a crawl, walk, run principle, where if we're doing something for the first time, we don't commit much resources to it, we iterate, we learn. Once we get data back, then we can start to invest. I think this applies to sales, this applies to product and R&D. And so coming back to my kind of short-term versus long-term payoff point, we really wanted to think about what do we really know and we can really say this is working, and how do we slowly start to press the pedal on investing in that. And for us, it was mostly sales and customer success. We had a lot of customers. They were using us in a meaningful way, but the market and our penetration was low. So we really wanted to get the right people in who had this customer success experience to help grow customers and make them successful. It took us 6 months to find the right person. It took us 6 months to bring her on board, get her up and running with your 3 to 6 months of onboarding costs. And so those things take time. I think it would have been a bit silly to hire her and then hire 10 more and assume it's going to be going well. And so she's slowly building her team up. She's learning our customer segment. We're starting to see some payoffs on that with increased usage in our platform. And so coming back to our kind of crawl, walk, run principle, that's a nice, I think, example of where we had a pretty good data, we had pretty good examples of what data was telling us, and we reacted and we slowly started to invest in this, and now it's starting to pay off. So I think coming back to the short-term and long-term payoffs, customer success and sales were 2 examples where, on the sales side, we have 2 MDs who sell to our insurance brokers, our insurance carriers. And we previously had a sales team of, I think, 10 to 15 people, a lot of junior people. Now, selling 100,000 euro contract to an insurer in Germany from someone who's maybe 25 to 30 years old with that much experience, it's not like you're setting that person up for success. Insurers, they think about risk, especially in our customer base. They think about working with partners that they trust. And so I think we also had a realization of maybe we don't need this whole junior sales team. Maybe we just need 3 to 5 who are pretty senior, pretty experienced, and can set us up for success. So that's one example as well, where we kind of came back to base principles, and we're now starting to see that pay off. So in terms of numbers, I mean, for our company, I think when we raised the money, the 20 million, we were about 150 people, and we've now almost doubled revenues and have a team of 90. So we have started to unwind some of the cost base to really focus on, as I said, our German markets, our core products, our mostly short-term payoffs, and killing a lot of long-term investments for now, only having 1 or 2 priorities on the long-term investing side. And it's created a lot more healthier company. Don't get me wrong, layoffs are challenging. I think it's very easy to read a Reed Hastings book and say, yeah, it's going to be great, you know, going from 160 to 90 people. I think we were actually joking about rewriting that book for Europe, because it's not easy in Europe. Germany's different to France. Our principles were be transparent, treat everyone fairly and the same, and I think communication is super, super important. If you hire smart people, they'll start to figure out what's going on, and they'll know if you're not giving them the full story. So yeah, as of today, it's been really, really challenging, not just for me, but as our management team. But I think for us, we have to play the game on the field. The game on the field right now is capital is scarce. We should really be looking to get to profitability, and we think we'll get there end of next year now with the funding we have. And yeah, we're confident that we can make it happen.
All right. Thank you, George. I think we have a few minutes left for a bit of a Q&A, if we have any questions from the audience. If not, that is also fine. All right. Then thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you'll have an awesome conference. Maybe see you later.
Thank you.